Hey, welcome to R&B Focus Radio. We are here once again, and today we have another show lineup for y'all. We have our special guest for today is Regina Huber. She serves as the CEO of Transform Your Performance and leading with bold, value-driven, and heart-centered approaches to leadership for both herself and others. She is going to tell us a little bit about her background story, and we're going to learn a little bit about her. But you can go visit her website. It's transformyourperformance.com. Once again, Regina, thank you for your time. How you doing?
Thank you so much for having me on, Shimaya. It's a pleasure to be here with you today, and I'm really, really looking forward to this conversation. So yes, here I am.
And today's topic, outside of getting your background story, is from freaking out to freaking amazing. So before we dive into that topic, kind of tell the audience a little bit about yourself and how you became the CEO of Transform Your Performance.
Yes, it's sort of a long story, but I'm going to keep it shortish. I grew up on a farm in a small village in Germany, and I'm actually currently in Lyon, France. I've just traveled a lot in a nutshell, right? My business is based in New York City. I lived in Argentina twice, in Brazil twice. I lived in Spain for 7 years. I lived on the west coast of the U.S., on the east coast in New York City, also a little bit in Miami Beach, and so on and so forth. So I've traveled a lot also on the African continent in the last few years. I've always been out and about, and I think what really brought me to this coaching and speaking business was insatiable curiosity in a way, because I just had a lot of really amazing experiences and also some not so pleasant ones, of course, because I've always been taking big risks in my life, you could say. And this is how eventually about let me now calculate it, about 10 years ago or so, I started working on the current business, and ever since then, I've refined it, of course. I have created new frameworks and new approaches, a very unique coaching approach as well, based on all my eclectic experience that I have had the pleasure and sometimes the pain to grow through. And that's why you said, from freaking out to freaking amazing. I've certainly been in several situations in my life where I felt like freaking out, or where I was freaking out indeed. But I also believe that there's always a way to get back to freaking amazing. So this is how I live my life these days, with that knowledge and just knowing that we can always bounce back, and that as long as we are able to see our so-called adversities as opportunities for growth, we have a choice and we have options to make the best of them.
Yeah, I like that. And we're going to have to dive into the freaking out part, that portion of your life, because I feel like everything you do, like you didn't like say every single little thing, because it probably take you 2 hours to say it. But you're also a writer of Speak Up, Stand Out, and Shine. And you also have projects of being a co-author for 3 other books, contributing to articles, magazines in both the United States and in Africa. So with all those amazing accomplishments, plus the ones we haven't mentioned, let's go back to the freaking out period. Take us back to the period of your life when you were hitting adversity, and kind of tell us that story.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are several stories for sure. So, I just lived through a very challenging situation right now, which I'm not talking too much about yet, because I'm sort of still, figuring out a few little bits and pieces. And so that's going to be another surprise chapter at some point. But also, because you mentioned the book, I just wanted to quickly say, the term from freaking out to freaking amazing really came about when I was writing the book, because the book is about how to go from speaking anxiety to positive excitement when it comes to speaking in any challenging business situation. It doesn't always have to be from a stage or on a podcast or as a famous public speaker. We speak in business situations all the time, whether it's in a meeting, in negotiations, etc. So what I really wanted people to be able to do also in that setting was to go from freaking out to freaking amazing with the tools in the book. So I just wanted to quickly mention that, because a lot of people really freak out when they, hear public speaking, and they get really nervous and their butterflies go too crazy in their stomach. So it has sort of many meanings for me. But to go back to your question, actually, well, there were several, very, very serious situations in my life. As I said before, I lived in Argentina twice. I lived in Brazil twice. The first times of each were in sort of employee situations. The first time in Brazil, for sure, in Sao Paulo, and then in Argentina, it was an external consultant situation. But later on, I owned my businesses there, and that is, of course, always a whole other challenge. And so in Argentina, for example, I built and ran a bed and breakfast, and I had an investor's visa for that. I had certain, it came with certain stipulations and requirements. So, for example, I had to open a business and employ at least one person within a year, which in itself was challenging because it was a brick and mortar business. I had to build out a house. I had to first of all find it and buy it, etc. But I got it to work. It was challenging, but it worked, right? The business was open. But then the other problem with that was that they don't actually give you the license with that time. And it's a generally known problem, but I didn't, of course, know it before the whole process started. And I later found out that everybody was just paying the city officials off. And I just really didn't want to do that. And eventually they also showed up at my door, and I just refused to pay them off. And I wanted to do everything correctly. And I actually won a lawsuit against the city of Buenos Aires because I wanted to stay in integrity and stand up for myself rather than, falling into this corruption scheme. And that's how I won, because I was sort of lucky, if there's such a thing, because the judge, who was a woman, not that is super important, but she was, she said, when she heard corruption, she said, tell me more, right? And that's what I did to a certain extent. And that's how I didn't have to pay that fine that they wanted to impose on me because I didn't pay them off. And, nobody paid for my expenses at the time, but it was still a big victory for me, apart from not having to pay that fine. And then later, there was another even much bigger story. That one was sort of small against compared to the next one, but it was, it was quite serious, Shemaya, when I was in the midst of it, because I felt very, I didn't feel intimidated, but I felt a little bit invaded, if that makes sense. When people attack you for something that is not really, that you haven't done, right? That's just I feel very vulnerable in that sense when that happens. So, but anyway, so the second story was, once I was sort of a little bit just tired of having a bed and breakfast because I had to spend so much time at home for that. Although I did enjoy the interaction with clients, but I also loved dancing at the time. And in Argentina, of course, it was mostly tango. And then I also did some other dances, different Brazilian dances, capoeira and zouk and all of that. And so eventually I decided to move to Brazil, where I'd lived before, but in a different city. So this time it was to Rio de Janeiro. And I really loved that city. It's a beautiful place. Have you ever been?
No, I haven't.
It's a really amazing place to travel to. There is a lot of crime, but if you know how to move and if you get some guidance, it's fine, right? So anyway, I really love that city, and it's to me it's a place without equal. And it's so unique in so many ways. It has the ocean, the rainforest right in the city, and I really fell in love with it the first time I ever visited it. You could say even, many years before I moved there. And although the first time I went to Rio de Janeiro, I witnessed the shooting right away, right? But I totally enjoyed the climate, the tropical vegetation, the dancing, and especially the samba de gafieira dancing. And I was dreaming about that new project and this new business. I was trying to figure out what to do next. And I did figure it out, but I partnered up with somebody that was not such a great idea. And so this time things just didn't go that well. Once again, I did something similar as in Argentina. I took a huge risk. I put all my money, all my savings that I got back from that business in Argentina. I put it all into a business because also I wouldn't have gotten credit there, like a loan, I had to pay cash. So these are all my savings of all my previous work life, basically. And again, it was a brick and mortar business. So I partnered up with somebody this time. And sadly, that guy who I thought was my friend turned out to be much the opposite and turned out to be fraudulent. And that eventually, ended up costing me my business in which I had invested quite a lot of time, again, lots of effort, lots of love, really, energy. And I lost a bunch of money because I had to resell everything after some time. It just was not, without his name, it was no longer, it wouldn't have had the right traction, so to speak. I was also paying for this trademark and whatnot. Although he was only a partner in one part of the business, but it was so heavily impacted by that it just wasn't sustainable. The costs were too high. So I had to make a very, very difficult decision to close that business down and sell everything at a loss and whatnot. And, at first, when you realize what's really happening, you don't want to see it, right? You just want to escape the situation at first when it's a really difficult situation. I'm sure you've also sometimes been in really tough ones, right, Jemaya?
I mean, a lot of people can say they had some storms.
Right. I know nobody, right? Everybody has had something. And then for everybody, it looks different. But so I had to just really pull myself together and clean up the mess, as painful as it was to go through those individual stages of this experience, and selling the house again, and, everything in it that I had put together with so much dedication, also because I did have a limited budget, right? So it all takes a bit longer. I bought a lot online, used, whatnot, but it was just really painful. And it took me a long while to recognize the blessing in this experience and to really see the lesson in it. But I was gladly, also because I had really great friends who had studied holistic modalities, which I had studied at the same time with them. So I could help myself eventually, but also they helped me as well. So eventually I was able to step out of this victim mode, which is never helping anybody. So if people constantly complain about the situation, we just need to remember that does not help us at all. Even if we blame others, it's just not helping us. So I really wanted to step out of this poor me mode. And it wasn't a process from one day to the next. I have to admit that, right? But over time, I was able to really step into a more empowering mindset and then get stuff done and find a way. And it took a while, but it was just very cumbersome because I don't know if some of you listeners know that, but and I don't know how it is now, so I don't want to talk about now, but back then I found out, and a lot of people told me that closing a business was actually almost harder than opening a business in the city of Rio de Janeiro sometimes. And I paid this accounting person, the CPA. He helped me. I paid him twice because it was not. So it was just like not a very enjoyable process, to say the least. And I was close to freaking out several times for sure. But eventually, then I decided that, well, I wanted to stay half time there, half time maybe in New York City, because I eventually also lost my investor's visa. Also, again, Shemaya, you know what? Guess why? Because I didn't pay the people in the immigration office off. So they kept losing one piece after the other of my documentation. And that was a phone, like those Yellow Pages phone books in the past, like a phone book thick of documentation, which cost a lot of money too. But so they were just losing that over time. And it was just a really, really tough process. And eventually I said, look, I just don't want to play this game anymore. I did not want to pay them off. And in a way, you could say I lost, but I guess I just moved on,
And speaking of that, once again, listen, I Refocus Radio, talking to our guest, Regina Huber. What time period was it like after that situation got resolved? Did you, in the midst of that, find your way going to New York? Or was it after that when you find your way going to New York? What was your next opportunity?
Yeah, so I said, look, I think I need to go somewhere else and start from scratch, because I wouldn't, they wouldn't renew my investor's visa. And what is another place that really attracts me at this time? And I said, okay, New York. I had been to New York on short trips, but I had never really spent that much time there. So I went there for a shorter trip and to just really figure it out a little bit. I put everything in storage first because I wasn't ready to move yet, I really loved that city. I loved the dancing there. I loved my activities, my friends. And I had thought that I would stay there maybe for the rest of my life, although I don't say that anymore now, ever. Because I just know myself too well that, I might just not, if I say now where I am now, I stay for the rest of my life, that might not be true either. And that's okay. But anyway, so I went to New York, and then as I said, I wasn't ready to really move everything. So I put everything in storage, and a lot of things were actually stolen in storage too, but that's a whole other story. So then I went through a whole detachment process, because I left about 35 boxes of books behind in 6 different languages. And I loved my books. Every time I moved, I would usually unpack my books first together with my mattress, because I needed to sleep on something. It would always be like my mattress and my books, right? But so this time they didn't come with me. But it was only after like a half year or even more that I figured out that the visa was no longer coming through, and it wasn't going to be renewed. So then I just, unless I paid them, right? And I just really didn't want to do that. So that's when I decided that I would move. And I was still cleaning up mess, to call it something, because it just takes so long to get all the paperwork resolved. So I was traveling back and forth, first of all, because of the visa situation, but also because of the business paperwork. It wasn't just done in a week. I wouldn't have been able to do that, meaning that my energy was a bit dispersed at first, because of course I had to be in several places with my mind at the same time. But I started building this business. I started networking, building a network. I didn't have a network in New York City, right? So I had to really pull myself together. My confidence had been really, really badly affected. My self-esteem had been affected. I sometimes say it was below 0 at the time. So I had to really rebuild it from scratch. And I had to go out network and meet people and talk about a potential new business that I didn't have a clear idea of yet, but I had to start talking about it, because that's how it works, right? That's how we gain clarity ourselves. about what we really want to do, who we want to support, by meeting people, by, writing things down, by learning how a coaching business even works, because I had very different businesses in the past. So I had to also get coaching, invest in myself as well, and all these different things at the same time. So, of course, without that previous chapter, so to speak, it could have been faster. That slowed me down a little bit in the beginning, but it was processing and progressing, and it was, it's okay. It's a process, I believe. I started speaking. I started doing some of my own events to gain practice and to even also just talk in English more again, because I had been speaking Spanish and Portuguese for 7 years for the most part, and to just really get back into myself and say, okay, you know what, I can do this. Just because something didn't work out as I expected it to work out, and I was disappointed by somebody, or I had to, I'm not saying this in a sense of blaming, but that's how I felt, right? So that didn't have to be the end. It could be a new beginning. And then I try to figure out how I could pull all this different eclectic experience together into something meaningful and actually help others go through challenging situations in their own way, but based on what all the experience and expertise that I had gained through my experiences in a way, right? Also through my studies, but very much through my experiences and my learnings. And that's how I created this my very unique and holistic coaching approach. I call it Transformational Leadership Coaching, but of course, other people could call it the same too, and it's still a different approach. We all have, as coaches, we have our different ways of coaching, and different people who feel attracted to our approach through who we are, right?
Yeah. And speaking of that, now we're going from freaking out to freaking amazing. And
amazing, yeah.
You, as the CEO, transform your
performance.
Yeah, performance. I want to say preference. Transform your performance. I mean, we have a little idea, the motivation behind it, but at what moment did it become reality for you that this is a new business for you to tackle?
Well, as you can probably also see from the name, performance has many, many meanings, right? You can say, okay, it's work performance, it's a stage performance, it's your I don't know, your performance as in sports or whatever it is, right? So it really is valid for all those situations. But of course, I mostly nowadays work with people to help them in their professional arena. Also, always though, not forgetting about the rest of their lives, right? Because we sometimes look at what we call areas of our lives as if they were separate entities, but that's not really true. It's a holistic phenomenon, and that's why I believe a holistic approach is the appropriate way to create significant change. But of course, it also looks different for everybody. And for some people, the main thing right now is just to get a promotion or a raise or both, right? And for some other people, it's to reduce their stress levels or to somehow find a new job or get prepared for job interviews, whatever it is. So I mostly right now work with employees and with leaders in organizations, but also organizations really of all sizes. I work also with business owners. It's just been in more recent years, I have had more clients in the corporate world, and especially also in financial services, just because, I spent most of the time in New York networking and so on. But I also have had the pleasure to work with very, very different people. Like, the word diverse has gotten such a weird connotation nowadays with all the political agenda behind it. But I think it's safe to say that I have very organically attracted very different people with different backgrounds. I also currently, for example, work with a client in Botswana, and it's just been so enriching for me as well in that sense. And also because I've, of course, traveled a little bit more in Africa in the last few years. But to get back to your question, well, it was sort of it was a process. In the beginning, I actually was thinking I wanted to work mostly with performing artists. So in the beginning, the performance came from that angle. And then as I was networking more, turned out that a lot of women turned toward me and said, we need what you have to offer us. So I started working with more women. And at first it was mostly entrepreneurial women. And then I just met more and more employees. And this is how it gradually sort of drifted toward more employees and eventually really also leaders at all levels. And I really love value-driven working with value-driven leaders, with heart-driven leaders, with leaders who are not afraid to stand up for what's right, hence the word bold, because it's become harder and harder for leaders nowadays. If they don't swim with the mainstream narrative, for example, then they're very easily ousted and just not accepted. And it's I think it's just really important to stand our man or our woman and to really stand up for what's right and speak up for it as well. And that's why I just love to work with leaders in general who want to create more humane workplaces. I talk a lot about humanizing the workplace, right? I've written about it. I've done webinars with 2 partners in Africa about this topic. It's also about this new consciousness. I've written about that as well. The new consciousness of love, compassion, and co-creation that I think we need to bring more into the business world. But of course, different people come with different requests and needs. So for some people, we work mostly on upgrading their leadership skills, on upgrading something that is called conversational intelligence and trust building and all these different valuable aspects of leadership. And for others, they want to step up to the next level and to reach their next goal in their careers. So I like to really adapt to my clients' needs. I don't do just like pre-designed packages. I just, I have a very customized way of working with my clients after defining and analyzing what their needs are and whether it's even a good fit for us to work together. And then, of course, I also do trainings. I do speaking engagements, both virtually and in person. Lately, it's been more virtual, but I definitely want to go back to more in-person speaking as well, because it's just a lot of fun to also, to also interact with the audience directly.
And you just stay busy. Let's just keep it real. I mean, I don't know when you ever get to take a break, because you also hosted your own television show, and that was What's Your Spark? Tell us a little bit about that, because as if you're not busy already, you found time to do that as well.
Well, it was called What's Your Spark? It was for Win-Win Women. It was also on Roku TV. And I actually decided to not do that anymore exactly for that reason, Shemaya, because it was just getting a bit much, because it was a weekly show and there was no option to make it monthly or bi-weekly. And it's just a lot of time that goes into it, right? It was a lot of fun at the same time. What's Your Spark was, we covered a lot of different topics, but it's really about for people to find what their unique brilliance is and to be able to know, own, and show it and shine with it. So I also shared practical tools, like one that just comes to mind real quickly is how to write an effective vision. Some other times I had some guests on that I interviewed about topics that were relevant to my overarching theme. I talked a lot. I had a whole series about freedom and what that means to people, because I'm a very freedom loving person. And I like to say sometimes everything I do is in the service of freedom. And I like to always give whatever my clients come for in the first, when they call me to work with me, I always also like to give them a piece of freedom, whatever that looks like for everybody, and whether they notice that or not. So, that these are all really great things. It was so fun. I was just reminded of this the other day because a contact from Cameroon reached out on LinkedIn, and I was she invited me to be on a radio show there, and then she also got me on a TV show there. It was a total surprise to me. It was so fun though. It was one of the last days of my stay in Cameroon, and I literally had 2 clean outfits left and one that was, could have been TV fit. More or less. So they called me in the morning to come on the midi show, so on the 12 o'clock, noon show. It was a bilingual show, French and English, and I just said, okay, where am I going to get? Let me get a taxi, right? What clean clothes do I have? And I had to be there, of course, like 2 hours before to make them whatnot, or an hour and a half. And they made me dance on TV, and it was just a lot of fun. I had a wonderful moderator. I had met her before, actually, because she was also the MC for the conference that I had co-hosted. There was 2 other ladies, but it was just so much fun. And sometimes you just have to take the opportunity, even if it seems like you're not prepared, and then sometimes it's the best thing.
Yeah, it sounds like you just take these moments and just go. Like,
Yeah.
obviously you're prepared to do it because the person that invited you for that, show would never ask you to be on there and think you'd be a good fit. So for you to always be in a situation, I almost feel like it goes back to the title of the show, From Freaking Out to Freaking Amazing. Like, you have these moments where it's like, it could be chaos, but then you just go with it and then becomes this amazing experience.
Right, exactly. I mean, I was at that hotel. I had no cell phone that was working there. So there was one phone at the reception, and the hotel owner knocks on my door. It's a small hotel in Yaoundé, Cameroon. So knocks on my door and says, "Hey, you got to come to the phone. The TV is on the phone." And I run over, right? And then they say, "Well, I'm just the messenger here," the guy on the phone said, "but you're expected here at, it was in about 2 hours or so." So I had to literally just figure everything out. And then I was in a huge traffic jam with literally cars bumping into our taxis from behind. It was a crazy traffic morning in Yaoundé, but we made it on time. And I was sort of, yes, at the first moment, freaking out a little bit. Oh, what am I going to do? Do I have clothes still, and whatnot? And yes, and then we always figure it out somehow. And then it was, in fact, freaking amazing to be on that show just because of the fun.
With your experience being in all these different places, I mean, international, not just in one country, in many countries, different cultures, everything.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a common thread that you found as you met new people in different places? And if so, what is that common thread that seems to work?
Well, it's, I believe what it is to be open. When you travel a lot, that opens our minds, right? When we travel, our horizon opens. It sort of becomes easier to understand other people. We don't only part from our own little world, because we see that there are many different worlds and many different ways of living. And most of the time, the way I traveled was by myself, or, yes, in Cameroon, I had some people waiting there. Yes, for example, in Uganda, I went there, I had some people waiting, but that hasn't always been the case, and they are not always there. And I would, in Rwanda, I would take a motorbike taxi, and the drivers, they usually did not speak French or English. So you somehow, you get to know people in a different way, and to understand people in a different way, and where they're coming from as you think about those interactions. And why do they eat this and not that? And why do they dance in this way and not that? So I love dance, right? So I watched the different dances, and I'd seen a lot of different African dances before, but I had never in my life seen Rwandan dance the way I saw it there and got to experience it. I was invited to this wedding, and it was like so amazing. I mean, it was a completely new experience. And with every new experience, whether it's talking, whether it's, how people approach you in the street, or how they react to you, or how they behave at certain events, or how they work, how they dance, and what their cultural expression is. There's always this reflection going on in my mind about, okay, where is this coming from? Okay, well, why do they use these words? And, even language itself, that's why I love learning languages. Some languages, they don't have translation, or some words in some languages don't have direct translations, because we think differently. And I believe that when you go out and are open and listen and watch and observe, then you can always connect with people. I think that's the thread, the common thread.
Once again, listen, Refocus
This
Radio.
makes sense. Sorry.
No, you're good. Yeah, it makes sense. Once again, listen, Refocus Radio, talking to our guest, Regina Huber, and you can go to her website, transformyourperformance.com, and learn more about her company and what she does with her clients. Real quick, as we kind of wind down here, tell us a little bit about your business and your mission statement. And it kind of feels like it's just been throughout this whole interview, because of your stories in this mission statement, but kind of share with the audience a little bit more about your business.
Yes. So I do transformational leadership coaching. I usually work with a lot of women, but not only, I also work with men, and help them reach their next career goal and or become better leaders. And that always also includes better leaders of self, because I believe that any type of leadership starts with self-leadership, and we can only be authentic leaders and sustainably effective leaders if we really know how to lead ourselves in the first place. So that's, in my understanding, the most important leadership trait or skill that we need as leaders. I am always available for speaking engagements, whether it's for a virtual session. I just recently did one for a large financial firm for the Women's Network. We had over 155 people on, but it could also be a training for a small group, of course. I do workshops, etc. It's all customized work, right? And then I have, of course, also more like signature work, like for example, for a company event. I have several different topics on my website as well. And that's about it. I do have a YouTube channel as well and a LinkedIn newsletter that people can subscribe to, where they can receive free resources. And yes, and the book, Speak Up, Stand Out, and Shine, is on Amazon for anybody who feels like they can use some tools to prepare mentally, physically, and energetically for speaking situations, such as speaking on podcasts, on radio shows, on TV, from a stage, or in a job interview, or in a negotiation, or whatever it is for everybody. We all have those situations.
And you come across as a very positive person, and hearing like all the different stories of moments of the unknown. The storm comes and you're like, okay, I'm freaking out, but then it turns to freaking amazing. Did you always keep that in your back of your mind as far as staying positive and upbeat? Like, did you get that from your parents, or did you have a person that you were close to that kind of taught you that, or was that just what you've been like your whole life?
I think I wasn't always that positive person necessarily, but I do believe that I hear that a lot, actually, and that actually makes me smile a lot because, it's not that I'm always happy, of course, a freaking amazing life. I'll also actually have a website, a small website with that name, Freakin' Amazing Life, the freaking with an apostrophe and, not without the G at the end, just for a new product and project that I'm doing. But I believe that a freaking amazing life doesn't mean that life is always perfect. It doesn't mean that we no longer have challenges. It just means that we have learned to confront those challenges, or to just really, no longer react so automatically as if we were on autopilot, but really respond more consciously. And you know what, Shemaya, I know so much about what is really going on in the world in the background. If I only focused on that every day, then and I didn't have a positive spirit, then I probably, would be depressed all day long, but that doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help me. It doesn't help humanity. And I believe that, if we just make somebody smile every day, I know it sounds like a cliche, but it does create a wave, and it starts with ourselves. So if I get up in the morning and I do not feel good, and I don't always feel great when I wake up, I can tell you that, but I have my routines, I have my tools that I have created, I have my ways to get to a better place when I don't feel great, right? And I also I will always make the time, talking to what you mentioned earlier. I'm busy, but I will always make the time for dancing. For example, I actually went out late last night dancing because there was only that late opportunity for me, because there are no classes right now, in terms of, like, I like to do really intense African dance classes and things like that. So I've done a few yoga classes since I've been here, but I haven't really had that. So I said, okay, I'm going to go kizomba and Zumba dancing at night. And I even went there by bike because it's pretty warm here right now. So I took the bike there and I came back, and I really need this, even if it's late, sometimes it's fine. It's fine. We don't always have to live up to other people's rules, right? And if to me that means if I did not have meetings this morning at 7 and I need to sleep in a little bit because I need to recover and be fresh for the rest of the day for my clients who I meet with later in the day, then I will do that, because who dictates my life? I believe it should be me. I should have that freedom. And I don't go out late dancing every night. This is really just an example, but sometimes I need to adapt my needs to the requirements of the work I do, but I always will also make space for me and for what I need, because otherwise it's really, really easy for us to get burned out or to, just not stay healthy and get on a more negative vibe, right? Long answer to a short question.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It kind of goes back to what you mentioned earlier about experience all different cultures and, people. You mentioned openness. That's an approach to have. And I heard someone say to me before, just in conversation, an open parachute works better than a closed one. And I think that's a good way to look at that, because even when, like you said, things happen where you just adjust to it, you have time for your self-care, time for you. And speaking to other women who are CEOs and business professionals, what would you say generally to them for them to continue to just, remain joyful for what their calling is, whatever it is that they're serving for, or the gifts and talents that they're using to serve? What would you say generally to women who are leaders in their business to stay motivated like yourself?
Yeah, not just women, really everybody. It's just really about take chances. Sometimes it's okay to take risks. It's okay if not everything works out as expected. Because yes, I took a lot of risks and some did not work out as I wanted them to work out, for sure. But I had a lot of really freaking amazing moments in my life when I took risks and I lived experiences that not a lot of people have lived. Like, I have seen parts of Johannesburg that not even my local friends have been to. I have seen, I've done a lot of things that very few people have done, and it's not always climbing high mountains. For everybody, again, it's different, right?
Right.
So I think just really look at what life has to offer to you. There are always endless options and opportunities, even if it doesn't look like it at the moment.
Yeah.
For example, also, if you love to travel and you don't have a lot of money, well, I sometimes did not pay rent in New York while I traveled, and I traveled cheap. I spent less money traveling than being home sometimes. Just an example, right?
Well, you make it look easy, and I know it's not easy, but when people go to your website, transformyourperformance.com, they can see just how busy you really are. If we went through every detail of what you do, we'd probably be on the show for 3 more hours. But when you look at the opportunity you have right now with your platform, it looks like it's safe to say you're in the stage of really paying it forward to people, helping them learn from the lessons that you've already learned from. How important is it for someone like yourself to be in position now to really add that value for those who are kind of fresh? They're in the stage of freaking out, but they're not yet in that stage of freaking amazing.
Well, you know what? I'm always here for people. I put out a lot of free content, right? So if somebody isn't ready to sign up for a paid program, they can get tons of value online from me and other people as well. on YouTube, on other channels maybe, or on LinkedIn as well, and or sign up for my mailing list. Right now, I'm figuring out a little bit of a tech issue with that too, so it's not always perfect, as I said, but it's but I think it should be working again. Anyway, so there's a ton of free stuff out there. I've written so many articles. They are usually unpaid. So we also put a lot of work and effort into just putting stuff out there. And it's not, well, yes, it is for promotional purposes as well, but it's also to support people who might not be ready to sign up for a coaching program, or who might be low on budget right now. I've also done a few programs, for example, with a team of young people in Rwanda, where we did an exchange. They offered me accommodation in exchange because they didn't have the budget as a group, right? But we did a lot of mindset work, and sort of miraculously, on the last day of the workshop, additional budget showed up for them, which was not for me, but for them, for their project, right? And they made it, they created something really awesome. So, it depends on the situation. I've done free speaking, I've done paid speaking, but it's just about not taking advantage of people in terms of, when you hear that a speaker also speaks for free, well, there's a reason for that, and there's a place for that. But not everything can be free, because we also need to pay our bills, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's true. And man, I can probably go another rabbit hole with that. But I'll leave it there, because yeah, you really have a lot of value, and that's really great for a show like this, because the whole premise of the show is not just help people find their purpose, but help those who are struggling with their purpose, because sometimes your purpose, it starts growing, but the individual has to grow too, because if you let your dream kind of just benefit yourself, then it's not really a real dream, because the real dream, it benefits others, and it carries a lot of weight. And you know what they say, success, rent is due every day. So you gotta get used to the freaking out, portions of life, because it's going to happen. It's not if it's going to happen, it's just when it's going to happen. But you mastering those different phases by making life freaking amazing, man, that's what it's about. And you also have confidence, because being able to go to all those different places to live, starting, those different businesses, speaking different languages, experiencing different cultures, you have to also be sure of yourself. And I promise, the last question, real quick. What is your secret sauce to believe in yourself, so that way you grow with your confidence?
What is my secret sauce? Well, to constantly upgrade my leadership of myself, I believe. It's really to, and it doesn't always have to be hard work. It's just like the continuity, and finding a way every single day, even when it's not so easy, right? Because we all have those moments when we have either a setback, or when it's just not so easy. But really first of all, having my tools. There are many different tools that we can find online and in other people's work as well, but having a few tools that are always available. And then also just to look back and see, okay, I've achieved everything that, I've been in so many situations where I thought, this cannot be resolved, and there's always a way. There's always a way. And sometimes what I also do is I look at a situation from above, as if I was looking at the situation from the perspective of a hummingbird. And I ask myself, is this situation really as serious as it feels right now? And what can I do to feel better about this? What's the worst thing that can even happen? And that alone already is usually my hook out of the, that pulls me out of the water. And there's many things I could say to this, but I hope this is helpful and makes sense to people listening.
Yeah.
And I also want to say something else, Shemaya. Well, you also do this, right? You offer a lot of value. You're investing your time, your money, your resources, your efforts. I know a lot goes into this. I definitely do. So I appreciate that so very much, and I appreciate you.
Appreciate that, and thank you as well. And man, I'm glad I pushed for those few questions because that illustration of hummingbird was perfect. So once again, listening to Unrefocused Radio, talking to our guest Regina Huber. You can go to her website, transformyourperformance.com. You can also check out her books. She has listed that you can look more about information on Speak Up, Stand Out, and Shine. Speak powerfully in any situation. Want to say once again, thanks for your time. It's been awesome.
Thank you so much for having me and for asking me wonderful questions that, I think came together into a very beautiful conversation. Thank you. And thank you to everybody listening. I appreciate you all.